and it would be great to see your faces. Okay. So let's go. I've got as usual with online talks, you've got the little challenge of making sure I am sharing the correct slides. So let me know if you can see my screen. You're on mute.
Yes, we can.
You can. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you very, very much. Cool. So look, I had an option of topic areas that I could focus on and I could talk about today. But I thought this would be an interesting one. One, because in a way you could almost, I could answer that question, in a second, but I was quite intrigued to actually hear from you guys and see why this is topical, right? So this is what I'm going to try and unravel, and I will go into detail on that. So today we're going to ask the question and hopefully get an answer on the question around, can product managers work in industries aside from tech? And I've put a subheading in there, because in the end, this is really about your own career North Star, right? This is about your journey. Don't walk anyone's journey. And you would hear me, sort of reference things like this because, for me, I am passionate about, just making sure that we're all living our best lives, and you're not following just the money is important, but you find something else, aside from money that's kind of driving you. So as I've been introduced, thank you. I'm Tosin Onibon-Oje. The agenda for today, number one, I will talk about my background and how Amazon came to be, that amazing project came to be as well. But in answering the question at hand, I'm going to look at it from sort of two perspectives. One is from the actual product itself and the type of the product. Let's dissect that. Then let's also focus on what problem is being solved. And hopefully, by the end of this, we would all be experts in being able to, sort of answer that question, if it was raised again. And then I would like to touch on, generally, what are the key skills that you would require, which you've probably heard over and over again. But I would, sort of solidify this element around what are the key deliverables that you would have as a product manager. And that's regardless of what industry that you work in. Then finally, I hope to sort of just sort of round up. And that's what the last slide is about. And then the floor will be open. But I'm conscious of time. It's nearly 1:15. So I've, probably only got about 15 or 20 minutes and then the floor is open. So let me start cracking on. So hopefully you can still see my screen. This yes, is yes. Really, yeah.
Can you, sorry to cut you short, can you show make it like full screen?
The full screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Does this work? Is this better?
Exactly. Okay. Yes.
All right. Awesome. You. So I studied information engineering and technology management at university. Graduated many years ago now. I'm not going to age myself, but you can probably tell if you looked at LinkedIn. But after that, whilst I was actually at university, I did a placement year. And if you ever get the opportunity to, I know in Nigeria, I think it's called IT, because I know quite a lot of people would work with my dad along those lines. So if you get an opportunity to take that advantage. I did this and I worked as an operational designer for British Telecoms. But it was, I was simulating problems, and effectively just trying to assess how the company would respond to a particular problem, but without actually allowing the problem to land. So, you kind of, you code it up. And at the time, I used a simulation tool. So I think now we call them no code, but there was a small level of C++ coding that was employed in there. But then I graduated. I loved IT. I loved business. And my first role was actually working with a company called Schlumberger Sima. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. I think in Nigeria, they're probably more of an oil industry. But here at the time, they were oil, but they were also into IT, and they're kind of broken apart now. But in that company, I was working in sort of health administration. And then I left there because it wasn't a graduate role. I was hoping to get onto the grad scheme, and that didn't happen. And luckily for me, Barclays happened. And so I moved on to Barclays. I first of all started out in data, then moved on into the campaign analyst for the marketing team. And very quickly, things changed. And, we can talk about that later on, but that's the way life works. And then I quickly, jumped on board and I went into marketing. And then marketing took me to propositions. Now, interestingly, as you can see, so on one side, I'm telling you what the roles were. On the other side, I'm telling you what industry I was working in. So I started out in wealth management, all with Barclays, moved into private banking. That's not stated here. But then I finally, my last role with Barclays was within their mortgages arm, and I was doing proposition. And for me, I often reflect back and think of this as sort of the first level in my product experience. Because what do you do as a propositions person? You are doing customer research, you are trying to understand the market, and then you are devising and designing the propositions. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So if you think about the way products is discussed today, that would very much be your discovery stage and your strategy definition stage for the product. Then I had my first child, and then I joined a company, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but luckily I found a company and they offered me the role as a product marketing. So the product I wasn't quite sure, but the marketing, I thought, right, I've got that nailed. I can do marketing. But it was actually in credit cards. It was a very small company by the time I left many years later. I think we started as about 30 or 40. By the time I left, we were, I don't know, 1,500 maybe. And during that time, I worked in credit cards. I worked in digital payments. So what do I mean by digital payments? It just means that you have a contactless, a cardless payment proposition, effectively, right? Think, PayPal, but PayPal credits. Then there was also merchant payments. And that's basically, if you think of I'm trying to think of the sort of the retail companies that you have. Imagine if you went into, I think Ebano is a popular one, but they happen to sell fridges and freezers or laptops, but you couldn't afford, however much that laptop was going to cost you. You would need some kind of credit proposition, right? So it's about how do you split that payment, and that's what I was doing there. The Amazon bit came in because my company then went from designing our own credit cards and designing credit cards for other companies. So, and that's where Amazon came in. They obviously came to us and they had a problem statement, and me here was the product lead on the delivery of that credit card proposition, which was, pretty exciting because up till that time, my company had, effectively was working in sort of designing our own credit proposition. We had acquired a new business, but we hadn't, so this was the first time we were delivering a proposition for a retailer, and definitely for an online retailer. But for the size of Amazon, it was a big deal to us. So for me to be, at the hench of that was pretty interesting. And to be honest, in terms of how life works, I wasn't even supposed to be the product lead on there. I was supposed to be helping out with governance, and then the person who was going to take it on couldn't. And I remember my director sort of saying, Tosin, you're going to have to pick this up. And I was like, me, that they wouldn't even allow to talk to Amazon, like 2-3 weeks ago, me, just in case I said the wrong thing. Right. It's like, it's Amazon. Don't say anything. And here I am, you're asking me to actually deliver the product to them. So it was sort of like fear and trepidation mixed with excitement. I'm probably more of an anxious person. So at the time, but I think I was still younger then. So there was still sort of exuberance, youth exuberance. Like, I'm going to deliver this. So it was fun. It was hard. It was painful. I lost so much weight. If I looked at the pictures of me a year later, I barely had lunch. I was like, it was a prayer point, like for everyone who knew me, like this has to launch and this has to launch very well. But, thankfully it did. Trust me, there was a whole load that didn't go right. But the bottom line was that the APIs were built, the process, the customer onboarding process was designed, the loyalty system was designed, the whole element of building that product, I had a hand in that, and I took it through all of the governance that it needed to do the whole T's and C's and everything that you can think of from a product point of view. So in summary, I would say I didn't choose product, as in terms of how my career has gone. I didn't choose product. So many of you are in here, you probably heard about product and you're interested in that. Wasn't me. I didn't even know when I went to university, I didn't even know there was such a thing as product, right? It wasn't what people did, many years ago. But I love building, I love creating and launching innovative product. And, and specifically, it is about being innovative. I would be bored if you asked me to do the next paper. Why do I want to do the next paper? I want to do something else that's not paper, and that's the area that really, really excites me. So nonetheless, at this stage in my life, I would say I'm really excited about changing the narrative of what a PM looks like. I think earlier in this year was when I realized there was a whole plethora, young people who just want to get into product, in the Nigerian, in Nigeria. And I was so excited, I'm seeing software engineers and I'm just seeing everyone talking about tech. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be part, and be talking to you tonight and talking about products. So currently, I work for a UK retailer, a high street supermarket. We're online. We're on the high street. Well, not necessarily on the high street because we're quite big, so we're not necessarily on the high street, but we are out there across the country. Number 2 in the country. And I look after, online payments. There are parts of the features that I specifically, focus on. But we don't have to talk too much about the company itself. It's more around, what it is that I'm doing. So hopefully that helps and gives you a background to, who I am and where, the Google questions that you guys were inquiring about yesterday. So then when I thought about the question, I sort of wanted to throw it back at us because, as I said, you could answer that question in a minute. But I think the question has to be, we're probably asking the wrong question. I would put it to you and say, what problem do you want to solve? When you get into product, apart from the salary and the pay, the question has to be, do I want to be the person, building the next unicorn? but actually, what is it that you are doing, behind that? Okay, yeah, you're in the papers and everyone's applauding you. What is it that's going to really excite you at night, so that when you go to sleep, you can say yes, and you can say to your family, this is what you do. And this is where I've almost kind of tried to break it out. So I've said, you do have the non-tech products, right? And you have product managers in all of these areas. Whether it's food, we actually have different names for them. So you think of your FMCG, in Nigeria, we have Unilever, you have Cadbury's. Those products, they would usually have someone called a category manager. Now, ask yourself, what is a category manager concerned about? They're concerned about what is profitable. They're concerned about ensuring that whether it's Milo, whether it's Bombita, that product remains on all of our tables and that we're interested in. And that person needs to be working with marketing. They need to be working with advertising, but somebody has to be responsible. That's what a category manager would say, and then if they weren't as big, if I wanted to create a new beverage today, you would want to make sure that, supermarkets were stocking it. And, if not, why are they not stocking that product? So that's what it would look like in an FMCG. In food, I have a family member, and I was talking about them earlier in the week, and they're a head of product, but they work in food. They work in the smoothies industry. So again, they're head of product delivery because, a bottle of smoothie is still a product, and it still needs to go through that whole phase of user research, of the branding, of delivery, of launching. And then once it's launched, how do you ensure that customers continue to buy it? What are customers saying? Why are they, if they are throwing it away, if supermarkets are not buying as much as they were buying, why? What is the reason? Then education is another one, so if you were as we call it in Nigeria, a lesson teacher, a tutor, and you were providing maths and English lessons, on a face-to-face basis, you have your materials that you're teaching. That's your product, and if you were a company and you were providing and designing those education buys and classes, you're not going to personalize it every single time. Which is what product is, right? You create something and then you can resell it. In education, then you package it again. So that exists, and that's non-tech. The question is that what you want to do? Then, and don't ever let your background, stop you. It's more about, what it is that you want to do. So whether you studied food doesn't mean you have to always stick into food. I know someone who's got an MEng in chemical engineering, and they're working in food, and that's what they want to do. And then you have, the tech-enabled, as I've described them here, they are your finance products. So that's your current account, which would work with or without technology, right? You can go into your bank, you can withdraw money over the counter. Of course, there is. Now, the question is, how is it tech-enabled? Because there will be someone who will be using some technology of some sort. Maybe when you put your card inside the machine, the ATM, that's technology. When you wish to do transfer, on your digital app, then that's technology. So it's supported and enabled, but the actual product, the success of that product isn't, down to it. That basically the design and the construct of the product still need to be considered outside of the technology. But we can talk about that later. Again, it's kind of splitting hairs here, but in a way, it was just a way for me to help you see the different sort of setup here. And then you have, again, I've talked about education, but then you have edtech, right? So during the pandemic, there was a burst into the market of, technology enabled education classes, so whether that was for adults, we've heard about Duolingo, for language, which actually, was already there before the pandemic. But, for children, for example, my kids use something called Hit the Button for times table. Times table has been there, right? Typically you walk into a class and they tell you to read your times tables, but now you have an app that sort of, you're kind of racing against the time, and so it is enabled by technology. And then there are other ways that, other subjects that you teach. Again, your fitness classes, think of pandemic, maybe you had Pilates, or whether you would have your cardio classes. And then during the pandemic, we were all on Zoom. So those products are being enabled by technology. Now, then you have the actual tech products themselves. This is one, the Fitbits. This doesn't exist without the technology, right? So here I am, with this little gadget here on my wrist, but then it's reading and it's working, and then I can manage a lot, whether it's my targets, that we manage through the app itself, so other phone apps, WhatsApp, Facebook, again, then digital banking itself. There are loads of bank accounts, and I don't know if that exists. If you guys have that, in Lagos, in Nigeria, where end to end, I don't ever have to see anyone in a bank. I set up my bank account, the accreditation, the certification of who I am, the identification, the AML, that is all done online. So, again, so that's really about, the differences between, but looking at it from what the product problem it is that you're solving. So hopefully that makes sense so far. Then I then thought, right, how about what is it what about the problem that you as a product manager is solving, right? So I've kind of, there are loads of ways that people split out, what you do as a product manager. And, I'm not one who kind of says it's always going to be this way, it's always going to be that way. Have I seen all of these people? Has that been my role? Yes. You could be a strategy product manager. And what are you thinking about here? Again, let's think about, what I said my role was, in propositions. You're thinking market entry, you're thinking the pricing, you're thinking business case. This person is not going to be sitting with engineers on a day-to-day basis. This person, however, would most likely, when we talk about the mini CEO, as we used to be called, this is somebody who would be very, very interested in that, and that would probably be their job. Is they have a product and they need to make sure that it is successful. Then you have a growth product manager. So this person, the product is already launched. The question that they're trying to answer and the area where they add value is, how can we acquire more from this market? So today we have 500 users. How do we triple, quadruple that number? Or do we need to move into a new market? Then third, you have the feature product manager. And this is where I think a lot of times we kind of focus on, that's like the area where we think, that's all that product managers do. The person here is, really talking about what is the different features that I need to build for this product so that I can continue to engage with my users. And then there is a whole question about prioritization. So this person, they might be a technical product manager, but they might not be a technical product manager. But if anything at all, if anyone's going to be sitting in front of engineers or sitting very closely and working day to day, if you think of your agile production or your approach, this is the person who will probably be very much in that system and design and approach. So hopefully that kind of then answers the question when I then say, can you work in other industries? Of course you can work in other, a product manager can work in other industries aside from tech, but as per the previous slide, the question you should be asking is, what problem do I want to solve? And, how do I see myself solving that problem? But also, when you do get into a role, because when you're starting your career, you might not have the choice. So when I look at a role, When I was looking for a role last year, those were the things that I would think about. I would look at the product and I was like, do I really want to solve this problem? I don't. Particularly if I saw that it was too tech. Often I would see, someone talk to me about, software, SaaS. There's loads of software products, and maybe not. I'm in what I do today. It's about software, but actually you're solving a fraud problem. And for me, that's exciting. And I can see the numbers, I can see the metrics there. But it's something that interests me. But there are other things that will be out there that would not interest me at all. And that could be in banking where I have work. That could be in retail. It's not so much about the industry. It's about what is it am I solving, and does that excite me, and does that get me out of bed on a day-to-day basis? So hopefully that answers the question. I did want to touch on, what are the, sort of say, I've called it the slide, a day in the life. What are the actions? What are the areas that you're solving? And I've, put it all here. So I'm not going to, recap it, so we can have some time to ask questions. You're thinking about the product life cycle, you're thinking about the product strategy, discovery, product development, and the skill set that you are, pulling on. Typically, this 5: technical, data, some level of technical. You don't have to write codes, and if anyone says that, let's have the conversation. But you don't have to write codes. But all of these things, it's very much about what is the size, what's the size of your company, and how much can they afford? How many product managers can they afford to spread the work around? When you have startups, you will be doing a lot. When I was launching a product with, the company that I joined about 10 years ago, I was writing the FAQs. I was sitting down with it. We weren't using, it wasn't API days. So it was more of a configuration of an enterprise system. I was doing that. And then on the launch day, I was blowing the balloons. That's how, amazing my job was. I was walking to the shop.
Doing everything in a startup environment.
Exactly. In a startup world.
Data analyst.
Exactly. You're sat there in the boardroom and you're getting whipped for your products not being successful. You are everything. If it fails, it's on you. Literally. But then you're also, you're owning the communication, collaboration, problem solving, user understanding, strategic thinking, and just on that, actually, I was joking with my colleagues last year because one of the products I launched, about 9 years ago, was then being revamped, in the last sort of 2 years. And it made me laugh because there I was, designing this whole proposition. Literally, I was pregnant and, running around trying to figure out my project management skills. That product was launched, and it did the amazing work for many years. But by the time it was being revamped, we had a feature products manager or strategy manager. We had a UX designer. We had the engineers. We had a project manager. We had a business analyst, all just trying to solve this problem that, one person did, many years ago. So it really depends on how rich your company is and, how much money they've got will determine how much work you do. So there we are. And finally, what I would say is you might not enjoy where you are. With product management. And this has been a theme for me over the years. Some days are good, some days are not. But even if you're not enjoying where you are, just enjoy the journey that it's taking you to, that you are on, and where your work is taking you to. So today might not be a great day. Tomorrow would be an awesome day. But when you think about it, after 6 months, you would have had 6 months experience in whatever it is that you're doing. Whatever is giving you a problem, you're learning from it. Make sure you have people that you're talking to make that, journey sweeter and happier. But yeah, and that is, yeah. So key thing is know your why, go for it. And And I realized that I've actually I've lost some of the words here, but yeah, go for it and thrive, and just never stop learning. When at the point when I've had the most difficult times in my career, I stopped learning. I got frustrated and I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to learn. I kind of felt like I knew too much, and that's the worst place that you want to be. But yeah, so hopefully that gives us enough in terms of answering that question. And I would keep quiet now and open the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Tosin. Thank you for that breakdown. And I particularly took how you separated, working in the food company, working in ed tech, working in fitness, and not just limiting it to just conventional. The regular tech that we know it. And especially for us here in Nigeria, there is that we have a proliferation of fintech, right? We have a lot of fintech. We have Stack, the Flutter Wave, the Piggyvest. They are so popular, right? And ideally, you hear these terminologies or these companies being named more often than regularly. And they are the ones, they seem to be the one employing most of the tech people, designers, developers, because they have the funding, they have the investments, and all of that. So again, before I go into my own personal questions, I will just open the floor for everybody on the call. So guys, please, Tosin has just dished out some interesting things for us. So let me know if you have any specific questions. Maybe what we can do is to make it organized. You can just raise your hand on your Zoom, just put your hands raised, and I'll just pick us one by one. Okay, let me start with Eniola. Eniola, fastest finger first. Eniola, please go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Tosin, for the presentation and everything. So insightful. Okay, basically, let me just rush over. Actually, I'm not into tech. I have a background in health sciences, and going into the PM in like the is it becoming a PM thereabout? What I want to ask is, if I don't want to go into anything tech, like maybe don't want to develop a product that's maybe mobile or something, or maybe an app or thereabouts, is there an opportunity like almost everywhere in Nigeria, like where opportunities are in tech and organization where you have to build a particular product, not food, not this and that? Do I know of Nestle and some other food industries that that have product manager for their companies, for their food research and all those? But I think you have to have a basis in that, maybe food science or something. Like now, me coming in as an health scientist or something, like I'm particularly into event planning too. Is there a room? Are there companies actually that recruits PM or want to actually, are there opportunities? Basically, that's what we just want to ask.
Okay, thank you. That's a brilliant question. So, and I would answer it by saying you can only apply and you can only work in roles that are available, right? And so in that sense, I do feel for you. Now, do I know the entirety of the Nigerian market and, what product management roles, and I'll be lying if I said I did, because I don't. But in terms of what we were just discussing a moment ago, I totally get that at the moment there is a proliferation of that, there's a burst in the market of the fintechs, and therefore that's where it's available. What I am seeing also, though, is education. Education tech seems to be, sort of like a new segment that's blowing up. So if you're answering the question that I asked you earlier about what you would want to do, if you wish to work in, say, food, for example, and that's where that's where you would, because you don't want to do, you don't want to work in the fintechs. And I'll come back to that in a minute. If it is food that you want to work in and somebody says that you don't have the experience, I would I would do one of many things. One question is ask yourself how much you really, really want to work in this industry. Then two, what are you bringing to the table as a product manager, right? So what skill sets do you have today that's transferable, that can solve the problem? Look, most organizations and many leaders, they would pay you and they'll give you the job title as long as you are solving the problem. And that's the question you have to answer is if you can, then there is, quite a few things that you can do because you can then begin to target those roles. Follow the people who are working in the product in that segment already, or in that company, or in those companies rather, pardon me, and then show your interest. Is there a problem that you see that you can help them solve? Is there a customer research? Is there a customer insight? Is there a trend that you'll see that you can help solve? This is not about stalking people, but see if they are receptive to that conversation, and be open. That your background might not be in that domain, so it's not food, but you do have similar. If you're coming from a health background, that is still close enough, more than me that I did IT, for example, and here I am working in retail. So there is, but you have to do that selling. Right. Even if you went into tech today, you would have to do the selling. So if food is where you want to be, then, be strategic about it. Identify those people, identify those companies, and literally just make a list, who is working on product? Have I reached out to them? Do I know the insights? Do I know what problem they are facing? Is there any way that I can help someone? I know that when I was looking for work, one of the things that I would do, if I had spoken to a company and they hadn't responded, I would look out on the news and I would sign up for the news and I would say, oh, I've just seen this, by the way. And then, just link it to what I could do, and I have the experience to be able to do X, Y, Z. Sometimes they'll respond, sometimes they don't, but if you never try, you would never know. So where I started from, you can only apply to what is available, and what is not available. Can you make a railroad for yourself, and can you sell? If you're confident, if you're happy that, look, all of this, fintechs and all of this, it is not for me, then focus on those. Identify the people who are already working in there, and people who might be open to conversations, and do the selling. If you can show that you can solve problems, there will be people who would be willing to listen. But hopefully that helped.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, so thank you, Ella. Thank you, Tosin, for the answer. So I can see Tobbs. Tobbs, you can go ahead with your question. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Tosin. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Really appreciate it. Okay, so coming from the world of I studied biochemistry in school, and after which I moved on to working around data analysis and supervised machine learning. So last year, June, July, yeah. So there was this project manager. I think he has a couple of experience or years in project management, and then he wanted to establish his own startup. So he came and then he introduced like 10-15 of us into product management, of which he did the training for us, and then also gave us internship. But it started fully remote actually. But then was it last week? It was supposed to actually go live. And then if he got clients that was to work with, two of them, and very interesting projects, virtual POS, and then also AI application for HR. But the issue now is it's a startup, and then in the mail he actually rolled out. He said there might be no payment yet due to the fact that the client has also not paid, and then probably when they've passed the first milestone, then they can pay out workers also. So my very interest the project are quite interesting for me, at least someone coming from the world of machine learning, and then you have something in AI to work on. So my question is, at what point do I say, okay, at this point, if you don't get to pay, then you might really not do anything for you? Because for me, I just feel it's just part of building great portfolio, just having something solid on your portfolio for product management. And so at what point do I say, okay, if, because I know it actually not very ideal to leave a product in the
Halfway.
middle, when it's still when you are the sole person that started. And then, so at what point do I say, okay, fine, at this point, I don't think I can work with you again if
Yeah.
you're not going to pay anything out? And then, secondly, I've been applying for foreign remote jobs. That's from Nigeria.
Yeah.
But most of the time, well, I have interesting CV, but most of the time, the reply I get is, okay, they are remote, but then they still want you to be in your country, in their country. They
Yeah.
want
Yeah. Yeah.
to. In fact, like 4 or 5 of them just declined. I still go on this afternoon. So how do I walk around this, or how do is there a way to convince them? I don't know. Probably that's how my question should come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you. So those were two really good questions. So let me just make sure I've understood the problem statement here. Biochemistry background, but luckily you managed to do some data analysis, and you've got some internship that you've been working with a startup. How long have you been in that startup?
Okay, I started last year, August. So started internship then, and then they took break in January, so as to at
Okay.
least get yourself proper. Yeah.
Okay. So probably about 5 or 6 months worth
Yeah,
of
5.
experience. Okay. And the data analysis experience, how long was that for?
Okay, I've been doing that for a year now, more than a year now, working around data.
Around data. Okay. So look, you do have, I would say to me, that sounds like 18 months, around 12 to 18 months experience doing data and doing some level of specific product management. So, hopefully your CV tells that story. Your first question was, at what point do you step away from this internship role? And I probably wouldn't have a direct answer for you, but I would ask another question, because I'm a product manager and we always ask why, and we ask more questions.
Yeah.
So the question I would sort of say, number one, is how far away from a usable product are you?
Well, we've actually not started, so we tend to start probably in the next 1 or 2 weeks.
Okay, so what you've been doing so far is more of the training of what will be required to build that product.
Yes. I took training with them, and then I also took another training. So ideally, I've just been doing internships majorly, so
Okay.
as to just get to work around real life applications, and then to really know what product management is all about, coupled with coding and all.
So one thing I would say is, when you say I have just been doing internship, right? You've been learning.
Yes, learning.
Even in March, you know what I mean? You've been learning, and you've probably been putting code together, right? And you've been trying to understand what questions you would ask as a product manager. So number one, don't undersell that experience. Yeah. Even when you come from a non-related background, when you did your biochemistry, let's be clear here. What you did in completing, whether it was a 4 or 5, however long that course was for, is you understood how matters, how they work, how they react with the world, and the chemicals that exist. So that is some, analysis that you would have done there. Then there is also, there's also a level of, then maybe you would have presented a dissertation, which would have meant that you would have had to solve a problem in your paper, in your final paper. So consider all of that in your background. None of this is just this or just that, okay? So once you've not built a product that's been a learning up till now, the story, of course, will be better when you do have a product that, one of these clients would be able to use, because then you could say, I built a product from scratch that enabled XYZs and, now has how many customers. That story is stronger. But to be able to say that you have the architectural basis to enable the startup itself to be able to go out and say, I have these skills, that they could work with this client and be signed up by this client, that again on its own is a strong point. Now, the owner themselves would have done some work, but that they've done that work based on the knowledge that has been input into you guys. So you are again bringing something to the table. Okay, so the answer though as to how long do you stick around, that question is only you that can answer that. If you're still working and you're still earning, then I would say, what is the problem with sticking there and getting that experience? Because you are in somewhere at the moment and you can pull that experience, maybe hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months. But don't stop looking for work. Right? So you're still looking out there, but obviously, the story obviously gets stronger the more that you can now build a usable product. Once you build a usable product, then you're out there and then you can tell a story. Otherwise, it's very much you're laying the ground, and there will be some people who will not like that story. They would not like the fact that, you moved on, but it is what it is. It's your path, it's your story. And you just got to walk it. So, if that was me, what would I do? It's all about, can I afford to be an intern? That would be one of the first questions I'll be asking. And if I think back, I couldn't afford it to, work for free, even if I was being trained. And that's the honest truth. So you have to answer the question. If it is possible that you're still able to do that, then yeah, go for it. But if it is not affordable for you, then you have to continue to look, but don't leave until you find something else, would be what I would say. Now, when you apply for foreign for roles, they're still asking you to be in their country. I've seen that. And I'm usually quite intrigued by that. Again, my role, for example, was remote. I think they're wanting us to come back to the office, but it was remote, but limited to the UK. It has something to do with the rules. It has something to do with, where do we allow data to go to? So if I decided to up sticks and, go to Nigeria, as I know some people have done, because their role is fully remote, I would be breaking the laws because I would be logging in over the internet in Nigeria. And that means, the data that customers or some of the work that I am working on would now be open and in a different jurisdiction. I can't even say the words right. So that's where those laws come in. And that's why. So what can I say to that? Once you see that, ignore, maybe don't put the effort in applying, ask them, will this role be open to non-residents? Maybe that should be the first question that you're looking for. And you'll get better at it when you're job hunting. So you can quickly look and make sure that you identify if that role is actually applicable to you. And if not, you don't waste your time, applying for it. And that would be what I would say. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay. Wow, that answer was... No, I just pick a statement from what you said. No, don't undersell yourself. I think it's one of the issues people have in the beginning of a career. Everybody has it, because I've also had that kind of feeling, right, where I felt like, I'm just starting out, and so One thing I always tell people is that every experience you've had, even prior to becoming a product manager, is part of the experience that you used to sell yourself as a product manager. Right? Some people feel like, oh, until I have that PM experience, then I've not had any experience. So you're underselling yourself. Every experience at all you've had, if you worked in banking, you've worked in customer success, you've worked in every experience matter. And because the PM role is quite dynamic, right? Is one that it's not limited to the actual, working in tech or being a technical PM or, understanding the technicalities of the role.
Yes. I mean, I cannot tell you some of where my colleagues have come from. And we joke, I joke about this because, it's taken me so many years of experience and so many, how many layers of, whether it was my degree and all of the other certificates have done on top of it to get to where I am. And then you get people walk off the street and then they'll just, I had one colleague, I remember, he wasn't a product manager, but he was business development, selling the product I was working on. And he had traveled abroad and was working in art or something along those lines, but he was going to come in and work in payments. But he was amazing at it, right? But the important thing there is the confidence, is that you know exactly what your skill set is, what you have built, what you've learned, and then you know that you can transfer that. And when you sit in front of an interview and you can stand behind and you as Nigerians would say, with your full chest, say it, and stand behind those skill set, they would be hard pressed to sort of say, no, I don't want to listen to you, and I don't want to talk to you. But and just one thing, just to add, as I was saying that, it just occurred to me, first is remember with your CV is just to get you through the door, right? And when you then get there, at that point, you own that place, right? The next question is, can you make them employ you? And so think of, all of those stages in your application differently, and approach it differently. The first stage is, I need my CV to sell me, and I need it to sort of pinpoint what it is that company is looking for. Then the next stage, when you are face to face with them, is to make sure that you sell yourself, you can solve that, you show them that you can solve their problems, and that you're employable, and that you're going to solve the problems that they have. And, hopefully soon, somebody would say yes, and somebody would believe, that story, and they would want you to work with them, and hopefully vice versa as well. You want to work for them, and then a match is made, and that's when we have new roles.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you so much, Tosin. Thank you so much. I personally have learned from this session. It's really insightful. I'm just happy I did not miss. Right. So we'll take more questions. I don't know if anyone has a question. V was raising her hand, but I think she's having issues with her network. So we'll take. Okay, we are supposed to end by 8, but let's just see if there are questions. If you have questions, please drop your questions as quick as possible. Just raise your hand on mute, and let's have your question so that we can round up. Question. Okay. All right. Okay, I think there are no questions.
Okay.
What's in the chat box? All right. Everyone here is saying thank you for this session.
You're very welcome.
Cool. Right. I learned personally. I am sure others learned as well. Thank you so much. All right. So we will be ending the.
Okay. Thank you, Blessing, for covering up for me. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Tosin. This was really insightful, sincerely, and that particular sentence of "don't undersell yourself," I'll kind of take home, even though it's something that I know, right? But I'll still take it home again because, you know, the way you re-emphasize on the point of not underselling yourself is super duper important because, again, like we said, people feel that, especially people in the entry level will always feel like, oh, I don't have that PM experience, but then your experience is not limited to the PM role. It's beyond the PM role. So, you know,
absolutely,
that's personally going to be my own take home for this section. And I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, for the ideas you've shared. And I believe everybody on this call has learned one or two things that they're going to take home from this section, right? And I want to also hope that, you know, for everybody on this call, you're not limiting yourself, even though we know that fintech is like everywhere in Nigeria right now. But you know, other companies are coming out. We are having companies in the agri-tech. We have companies in insurance tech. We have Cassava. We have Curacell. You know, we have Tangerine Life. We have all of these new people that are coming up: insurance tech, ed tech, food tech, you know, agri-tech. So again, the opportunity is broader than fintech, and you don't want to limit it to fintech just because fintech is very popular.
And make sure, you know, where I've seen, I was looking specifically as a strategy product manager in Nigeria, and I saw there was one actually for a bank, I think it was. You know, so there are fintechs and there are, you know, obviously banking institutions, you know, that just remember again, somebody has to design that product, that bank account. Who's going to sit, you know, and say, look, this is the size of the market that exists, and that this, you know, product, I don't know, I have no idea what we call, you know, what the different products are, but you know, maybe even, you know, telecommunications, for example, you know, who is going to sit on that and say that that product remains viable and continue to remain viable, or, you know, that you begin to look at new markets as well. So, and even fintechs also, as they get bigger, they would also start looking for non-tech PMs, you know, so be there and, you know, make sure you're having conversations with those people. You might not want to be the one building the app, but will you want to, you know, be the one at the front end, the discovery side of that product design itself. So yeah, don't limit yourself there. There's loads of opportunities and focus and problems that need to be solved by product managers.
Okay, thank you so much. So we can call it a wrap here. Thank you so much, Tosin, once again. Thank you for everyone who attended the section. We'll make the recording available so that you can, you know, have the recording, and if you want to listen to it any one other time and just, you know, pick up the lessons from today. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you, Tosin. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye. Bye.
Oh yeah, guys, let's tell you guys. I was supposed to tell Tosin thank you.
Thank you.
That section. All right, guys, I'll be ending the call now. Have yourself a good night rest.